Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Book Brew. Today, we're going to be bringing you our February wrap up. As well, we might talk about a few things we're going to try and read in March or going forward. So, I read a big grand total of four things this month.
Oh, awesome. I think I read 8 things.
All right. Well, I think you should lead it off then.
Okay. So some of this obviously was homeschool stuff, including the first thing, which is part of this Who Was series, these children's books. Who Was George Washington Carver by Jim Gigliotti. I think that's how you pronounce that. I might have butchered this. But this was about George Washington Carver, who grew up in Missouri, which is where we live now. So the kids really enjoyed that one. The next one I read was Warriors Don't Cry by Melba Patillo Beals. And this was a challenge book for me. We've got a family reading board that we're doing, and this was in the cookie jar. It was quite intimidating. I ended up listening to this on audio, and I'm really glad I did. This is a book about the first integrated high school in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it's told by one of I think there were nine. There were nine black teenagers who got integrated into this high school. And it was really hard to listen to all the abuse that they suffered and the terrible position that they were put into in regards to they didn't have a lot of support, and everyone at the school was looking for any excuse to kick them out, and so their grades had to be absolutely perfect. They couldn't slip up and show like the slightest amount of retaliation or aggression or anything towards these white students who were just terrorizing them and physically hurting them every single day. And so it was really hard to read, but I am glad that I read it.
The first thing I read this month was Impact Zone by Julianne Lindsay. This is the Tactical Crime Division's Traverse City series number 3, and it's a part of a Harlequin intrigue series. This was for the Who Picked This book club, where we're reading just pretty much all Julianne Lindsay's backlog. This one was a bit of a little jarring to me coming off of the Geek Girls mysteries, because those were just amazing and funny, and you just fall in love with the characters. And this one, since it's number 3, I didn't need to read number 1 and 2, and so I didn't, because I was in a hurry to get it read for the book club. But it was a much darker and just crime story about stopping a bomber, and it's a second chance romance between the investigator and his ex-wife that they split up because he had chosen his job before. And it was pretty sweet, because there was co-parenting element involved, and both of the adult parties were adults in the situation, and so
That's good.
That was very nice to read.
Okay, the next one I don't want to talk about, because I feel like everyone on BookTube loves this book, and I had a very different experience with it. But that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And this book, honestly, I loved the first part of it. The school setting. This is a historical fantasy, kind of loosely based off of China. I think it was either China or Korea, but I think it was China. It's this underdog girl, this like peasant orphan who gets into the top military school in the country, and has to fight her way to the top. And I really liked the school setting, but most of the book, or at least the last half, was after school, and it was in the middle of war, and the main character gets put in a special division of these sort of magic wielding people. The magic system is very based on their gods and channeling these godlike powers, and there's a ton of mythology in it, and I did not like the second half. I did not like the god magic part of it. I thought that our main character was just being pushed by external forces, had very little agency, and those choices that she did make were terrible choices. And I understand that this is book one in a trilogy, and so the author needed to write room for the character to grow. But the fact that this is supposed to be an adult fantasy series, and it felt so YA. The only things that made it adult were the horror porn, the torture porn, the graphic, gory, terribly disgusting depictions of wartime violence. And I think that was excessively unnecessary. I ended up skipping half of chapter 21. If anyone's read it, everyone talks about major trigger warnings for chapter 21. And yeah, I skipped half of that because it was just terrible and it did nothing to further the plot. So I didn't like it. I'm not continuing on. So no, not for me. Okay, the next one was another book that I read to my children, and this was Bayou Magic by Jewel Parker Rhodes. And this one was adorable. This was a story of a young girl, Maddie, and she goes to live with her grandmother for the summer. She goes to stay with her grandmother in the Bayou in Louisiana, and while she's there, she's learning her grandmother has a subtle kind of magic about her, and there's some African mythology just lightly running through there. And while she's there is a giant an oil rig that explodes, that catches fire and explodes, and there's a huge oil leak, and she has to use this African magic mythology stuff to kind of help the problem. And I thought it was really adorable, and I really liked it.
The next thing I read was The Sea of Monsters, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, number 2. I read this one to the children. They loved it. We're on book number 3 right now. This one, Percy's obviously coming off of his first heroic adventure, and it had a good element in it that I enjoyed, that everything doesn't revolve around him even after he's had, his time in the time to shine in the spotlight and everything, and quest gets given to his camp rival. But of course, he is the hero of the story, and he has to get involved in everything. Good world building by Rick Riordan, and just using the use of the Greek myths and just spinning them into modern mythology, like the Sea of Monsters is the Bermuda Triangle, keeping things on a more modern bent, I guess.
Nice.
So yeah, that's enjoyable, and obviously we're continuing to read those.
Okay, so after I finished my cookie jar pick, my next challenge was a holiday book, and I was really not feeling a Christmas or Halloween romance, and I feel like that's the only kind of holiday books I was finding. So I ended up finding on my library app this nonfiction book, Cinco de Mayo, The History of the Battle of Puebla and the Famous Holiday, by Charles River Editors. I think that's who translated it. It was Gustavo Vasquez. No, oh my god. Okay, I'm gonna try that again. Gustavo Vasquez Lozano. I butchered that. Anyways, this was a short audiobook that went into the history of the battle and why Cinco de Mayo is celebrated, and how the holiday actually started in the U.S., and it's not actually celebrating the Independence Day, because the 5th of May is not the Independence Day. That was just a kind of the battle that turned the tide for their independence, and how it actually helped the U.S. like a lot more than it actually helped Mexico. And it was really interesting. I am glad I read that.
Yeah, nice going with the nonfiction for the holiday.
Yeah.
Okay, good job.
Okay, so the next thing we read was Lioness Rampant by Tamara Pierce, book 4 in the Song of the Lioness Quartet. And this is the last one in a lioness series. My kids loved these, which I'm so happy about because I remember reading and loving them as a kid. These are female knight who has to pretend she's a boy until she gets her shield, and then comes out as being a woman, and they like have to change their perceptions, and the whole country has to decide if they're okay with women being knights and adventurers and sorcery and adventures. Yeah, they're fun.
Nice. The next thing I read was The Hollow of Fear. This is Lady Sherlock number 3 by Sherry Thomas. This one was just as good as the last two. So in the previous book, Charlotte Holmes she discovered that one of her childhood friends' wife was actually an agent for Moriarty. And in the beginning of this book, that childhood friend who had pretty much told his wife that they were estranged now and she could go packing, her dead body shows up in his ice house during a large party. So Charlotte then has to figure out how to prove that he was not the one that murdered her, even though all of the evidence, the apparent evidence on the surface would indicate that he would be the prime suspect. A nice turn in this one is that she had to actually be close to the scene to investigate. And so she, of course, as a woman, she couldn't show up there, even as the sister and go-between for the always locked away Sherlock Holmes. So she invented a brother persona, and she goes dressed up as a man and with the pipe and everything, and the hat and stuff. And so that was a kind of comedic element to it, where the people that know who she is, realizing that she's in drag and pretending to be Sharon Ford Holmes is the moniker she went with there. So I'll definitely keep reading these ones. They're a lot of fun. Just give you that Sherlock vibe, but with the whole twist and everything.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Okay, the next book I read was The Willoughbys by Lois Lowry. And I wanted to pre-read this before I started it with the kids because I wasn't sure if this was kind of going to work for us, because it very much is a satire. So it is middle grade, but it's there's a show on, is that Disney Plus or Netflix?
I think it's Netflix.
Netflix has it. But it's these children who hate their parents and their parents hate them, and so the children are trying to figure out how to become orphans, and their parents are trying to figure out how to become childless at the same time. So there is this scheming of how to get rid of each other. But the book doesn't take itself seriously at all. It very much makes fun of itself, makes fun of the genre of the... there's several times in the book where they say, much like old-fashioned people did, they took a walk in the sunshine, a brisk walk, or, everything's about, like, they're old-fashioned like that. This is what old-fashioned families do, or old-fashioned children would do. It's cute. It's a found family. It's very much satirical, though. But I liked it. I'm not sure the children would like it as much as I did.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if they would catch all of the satire.
Right, yeah.
But
probably just stick with the movie.
Yeah.
All right, the last thing I read in February was Murder by the Seaside. This is The Patience Price, Counselor at Large, number 1 by Julianne Lindsay. This one was a little more close to the Geek Girls murder mysteries. But, so this is about Patience Price. She is a licensed counselor, but she was just let go from her job in human resources with the FBI and has to return home to her island home of Chincoteague. And of course, a murder occurs, right near her when, or no, not near her. So a murder occurs and her ex-boyfriend is the prime suspect. And so his mother asks her to try and prove his innocence because she worked for the FBI. But she's always telling people constantly, I was in human resources. But everyone seems to keep thinking that because she worked at the FBI, she should be able to help in this situation.
Sure.
So, lots of fun of the non-investigator investigating the murder and all the hijinks and everything of a small island community, and everyone's in everyone's business. There was one of my favorite lines was she had gone somewhere and someone asked her about something that she hadn't shared with them yet, and she's like, well, it was no surprise that word got around. She'd been outside for 3 minutes now.
Yeah, you listened to the audiobook when we were all in the car together for a while. That was pretty amusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Julianne Lindsay definitely has her way to write amusing, cozy mysteries.
And the last thing I read is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar. And this was a short little sci-fi romance, which I'm having a hard time trying to fit it into a proper category, and I think that's what is so wonderful about this story is it's very short and it doesn't bog itself down by explaining the sci-fi elements, the time. So this is about two time traveling agents. They're on opposite sides of a war and they travel up and down and back and forth between different timelines. And so they're constantly moving and changing little things. Like they will, kill one person so that like their great grandson won't save a child from a, whatever. Like very, very butterfly effect changes, right? Little tiny changes. They change here and there. But they're so good at their job. They're very lonely. And they end up sending letters to each other. At first it's like taunting, and then they start to realize this is the only person who actually understands me because we have the same job, just on opposite sides. And then it turns really beautifully romantic, these love letters that they're sending to each other in these weird, unique ways, like the rings of trees and in like the smoke out of a cup of tea, the steam or whatever, and they're so advanced in their technology that they can process all these tiny little details and like figure out the data and like parse out the anyway. So it's very sci-fi, which was a little daunting at first, but once I got into it, it was very beautiful. And I liked it.
Nice.
I think you would like it more.
I will have to check it out then.
Because that's your two genres, sci-fi and romance.
Oh, yes. A 2-in-1.
Yeah.
All right. Now I think we're going to talk a little bit about what we plan to read.
Yes.
What we are currently reading.
Yes, in March.
Yes. So I am on a cookie jar pick, and I gave up, I DNF'd this book, I See You by, I can't even remember the author. It was bad. Like, it was just not going anywhere fast enough. So I picked another one, and that is Witchling by Yasmin Galenorn. I've only read a few pages of this, but it's having to do with otherworld, urban fantasy characters, and there was murder, and so obviously we're going to have to find out about that. My oldest daughter has wanted me to read Warrior Cats Book 1. I haven't started this one yet.
That is so sweet that you're taking that on. That's her favorite series.
And then Overlord Volume 3. I'm still trying to make my way through. through this one, and I only have like 50 pages left.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
No judgment, though. Definitely no judgment.
Oh, and also, Murder Comes Ashore by Julianne Lindsay is the next book in the Who Picked This book club.
Awesome. I'm going to be participating in 2 separate readathons this month. The first one is March Through History by Arg Schooling and Sarah the Story Girl. I'll link those 2 channels down below. They have a bingo board full of different prompts, but basically the point is just read historical fiction and nonfiction, which I don't really understand, but that's one of the bingo spaces.
Okay.
So right now today's March 1st, I've started The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. So that's my first read. And then the second readathon is Scala Along by Chris Bookish Coldren. And I'm so excited I found this readathon because I caught it at the very beginning. This is going to be like almost a year long, like a 10-month long readathon where we make our way through Lynn Fluelling's Scala universe, which I'm very excited. The first trilogy in that is the Night Runners, and I've wanted to read that for a very long time. So we're going to be reading the very first one, Luck in the Shadows, I think is the first book.
I think so, yeah.
This month. So, yeah.
All right, so that is our February wrap-up, bit of a March TBR. Let us know if you've read any of the books we read, or let us know about the books you read in February.
Yeah.
And we'll see you in the comments, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.